In this video, I'm going to demonstrate the use of Anaconda, and we're going to look at log analysis. Log analysis is an important thing that we do in cybersecurity because things will be logged. In other words, just a line in a text file, and that line in a text file will contain something about, well, an interesting event, something that we want to track and record. That interesting event could be as simple as someone visiting our website, and nothing wrong with that. We have a website, and people are visiting it. But it also could be representative of an attack, maybe an SSH login that's failed to log in, maybe a web attack that would be logged within our web server as well. We need to analyze those. Of course, any reasonably busy website, to use an example, will have millions of hits, and it will be impossible to watch that log file and figure out what is actually legitimate and what is representative of an attack. Therefore, we need a method that will help us with that. And there are many log analysis tools that will help us to monitor those log files and alert on things as well. And we're finding and using AI to help with that as well. When we start to use AI, we need to be able to provide data to that AI. It needs to learn from something. It starts with nothing. It needs to learn, what does good traffic look like? What does bad traffic look like? And in order to do that, we need to analyze log files and feed that data then in a format that AI can understand. We need to have labeled that data, and we need to help it to learn. Well, we're not quite there yet in our learning path. So we're going to start with something simple, which is just simple log analysis using a Python script. Let's take a look at some log files and then use a Python script in order to analyze those and to help us understand what's in those log files. Very common step, and something that we still will do, and we might do for things that are either lower hanging, easier to get at. Maybe they don't have a lot of entries in them, or maybe it's something that we need to watch generally and we just want to keep track of that manually. So let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is to clone the repository, and I have a video that is available on how to clone a repository, and the link to this repository is in the description of this video. So I'm not going to explain very much on how to clone a repository. In fact, I'm not going to explain it at all. I'm going to assume that you've either done it or that you'll watch the other video and get there and catch up from there and start this video over when you have caught up. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is clone that repository. I know the URL. Actually, let me back up. I see now, as I'm looking at my prompt, I'm in just the root of the C drive. So first thing I want to do is change to my home directory, and that's CD tilde. That other video walked through that. But just in case that happens to you as well, you never know. Make sure that your prompt shows that you're in your home directory. Okay, I have that repository cloned, and I can cd into there and take a look around, see what's there. I'm going to open that data in Notepad++. I'm going to open up one of the log files from the data directory in Notepad++. So I just need to navigate there. And then I can open up one of those log files. I'm going to right-click and open with, well, edit with Notepad++ will work. Your screen, your right-click action might be different than mine, but Notepad++ is better to open up larger log files in than simply Notepad. And so what we're looking at here, it is an access log that is in common log format, or CLF. You might hear that. We see the different hits on this website. It's a WordPress site. And so we see all kinds of hits that are coming in. And from this is the IP address 203.0.113.77, happened on September 5th. And someone trying to get WP login And then we see the user agent field here as well. Common log format will indicate the types of fields that will be in the access log. So IP address, the date, and the type of request or the HTTP method that's used. You can see on line 8, I'm highlighting that. I'll make this slightly bigger. There we go. Line 8, I'm highlighting the method here. We have a get method for HTTP, then the resource, and then the version of HTTP that they used, and the HTTP result code or response code that was sent, in this case a 403, which I happen to know to be forbidden. We also see a 404, which is not found, or resource not found. 200 is okay, and so on. We see all the different response codes, then the size of the response, and the user agent is also listed here. What browser did they come to you with? That can be faked and is often faked for attackers. They'll often fake something like that and make it look like, well, here's an example of Mozilla 5 Windows NT. And so the various user agents that will show up, you can't believe them to be absolutely true. They're not a source of absolute truth, but they can help to provide some indications of what's happening within the site at times. So they're just a data point that you would use. As it relates to AI, we're going to eventually be training on data similar to this. And so we'll be able to tell AI, okay, that last field in there is the user agent. It's not required to be present, but if it's there, let's learn what that looks like. If we see this ZMEU user agent, is that indicative of an attack? And we'll be able to look and quantify that and find out, is ZMEU ever getting or doing anything that we would call normal traffic within our site. The other log file that we have is an auth log file. And within that auth log file, we're looking at SSH logins. We can see that there were some invalid attempts. Someone tried to log in with the username admin. Someone tried to log in with the username test. Someone tried to log in with the username root, or the administrative user on a Linux machine. And we can see the source ports that they were using, the ports that they were using in order to do that. And so we can quantify these types of logins and quantify that against an IP address as well. Let's look next then at opening up that Python script itself. That's included in the repository. And let's take a look through that Python script. Within that Python script, we have some imports that are happening, and we're setting up some basic constants or high-level variables that we'll use throughout. So data directory, it's expecting to find those log files in the data directory we see on lines 11 and 12. And that log file, that data directory is set up by line 7, so where that's located. We have some functions that are defined within here. Let's not go to those functions first. I'm going to scroll down to line 51 where the script actually really starts, because otherwise we just have function definitions that are happening above that. So line 51, we're gathering failures and successes by calling the parse auth function. Let's take a look at that parse auth function then. So the parse auth function is going to look at the auth log. That's the second log file that we looked at. It's going to look at that auth log file and try to make sense of what's in that log file. I have that open next to us here in Notepad++. So we have a certain pattern that we need to analyze with Python. We need to tell Python what that pattern is. So first thing that we have is the 3-letter month, followed by looks like 2 spaces, and notably 2 spaces because we're at the 5th of the month in this log file. So what we can say is that there's a 3-letter month that will always be 3 letters, followed by 1 or more white space characters, and then the date number. And I just messed that up. There we go. Control Z is my friend. And followed by the time that occurred. And then we have the name of the machine and the process itself. And we have, notice, a colon is here as well. course, there are colons here, but we have characters followed by space, followed by characters, followed by characters. Eventually, we get to that process name followed by a colon. And after that, then, in the log file, we have either the word failed or accepted. And we see that is very common throughout this entire log file. As I scroll through it, failed or accepted is what we see within there. And then we have the username that follows in here. And we also then have the IP address and some other information. So let's go back to that Python script. We're setting up a regular expression here. We're looking for regular expression that contains failed password or a regular expression that contains accepted, because those are indicative of failed or success. And then we're looping through that entire file. And we're going to loop through that. And if it's less than 15, we're not even going to bother with it. Otherwise, then we're going to begin parsing the time that something happened within there. And if it's a failure, we're going to append to that. If it's a success, we're going to append to that variable. And at the end of it, on line 32, we're going to return failures or successes. Fairly straightforward programmatically here. Nothing magic, I guess, unless you've not seen regular expressions before, and I'm not going to talk through regular expressions. Here is not the time or place for regular expressions, but they are your friend, especially in cybersecurity. Spending a little bit of time learning regular expressions is definitely worthwhile. So back to the script itself, we're parsing we parse the auth log first. That's line 51. Next thing we do is parse the access log. Access log, again, common log format, using a regular expression on line 35 to parse that log format. And then we, again, go through the file and we try to group things as best we can based on the access log, the web access log. Lines 54 through 56 begin to provide us with some useful data from a cybersecurity standpoint. We're going to go through and count the number of IPs that have failures. And then also line 55, count the users that have failures. Are we getting scanned for a certain user? That could be an indication that someone's username has been compromised or credentials might have been compromised at one time or another. And so that's what line 55 is helping with. And then top IP counts is simply giving us the most common IPs that we're finding within that log file. I'll leave the rest of the script for you to determine exactly what's happening. We have some timing things going on, lines 58 through 70, and that's something that you can definitely go through. I'm going to skip ahead to the suspicious past the logging for web, because that is where things often get interesting. If we're looking for things, so /admin on a WordPress site, we will often change the admin login details. So we'll change that path when we install WordPress. And then that's a great indication that someone's scanning our site if we set up our admin site to be something completely different. It's called poker or blackjack or something. We make it called something like that. I happen to have playing cards in front of me on my desk, which is what made me think of that. But we call it something completely different, and the only time no one would ever think to scan for those words as related to an admin site. So we might obfuscate that in order to help us spot when people are scanning our site. And that's why a suspicious path is /admin. No one should ever be going to /admin on our site because we've never used /admin. That's a great example. Same with wp-login.php. No one should ever go there because we renamed that file. PHP MyAdmin is a MySQL administration tool that is used on the web. Again, if we change a path, then no one should ever be going there. So line 74 then is helping us to look for that, and notice that user agent that we had, ZMEU, before. If that shows up, well, then that's automatically suspicious. We must have determined that already. And also notice, though, that we are lowercasing things. That's something I want to highlight here. That access log, you'll notice ZMEU is a mix of case. If we weren't lowercasing that, then we might not see it. Case sensitivity is important in cybersecurity and is a way that attackers sometimes use to get around things if you're not, as a developer, thinking around lowercase versus uppercase. That's something that can come back around on you. So that's what line 74 is doing. 77 through 79, what we're doing there is really just setting up some overlap and sorting through things, and then we're going to be writing output after that. We're going to write CSV or comma separated value files. Those make it easy to import into, if we're going to import this into a database or another tool that requires a CSV, we're going to write to those CSVs, and there's a write CSV function that we have. And then otherwise, we're just simply going to write some summary and some other information out for us. And we'll see that when we run this. I won't go through further after line 93. Next, let's focus then on running this and doing the analysis. In order to do that, we'll use Anaconda. We wouldn't technically need to use Anaconda for this, but I wanted to make this an Anaconda demo, so guess what? We're going to use Anaconda for it, even though we could just run this with Python. But that's how we're going to get to it and going to make it, arguably easier for some things later. So that's one of the reasons we'll do it. It's an easy, low-hanging type of thing, low-pressure type of situation where we can get familiar with Anaconda and Jupyter within Anaconda. So I'm going to click on Start and then type in Anaconda and open up Anaconda Navigator. With Anaconda open, the next task is to open up Jupyter. And you'll have a couple choices for that. I'm going to open up Jupyter Lab. With Jupyter Lab open, the next thing we can do is navigate to our log analysis directory. Make that larger, although noticeably it is still somewhat difficult to see. Let's go dark high contrast there, and hopefully that's a little bit easier to see now. So cd space log analysis. Now I'm in Windows PowerShell, command line again. And within PowerShell, I'm at the log analysis directory. I can do a dir here. I forgot what I was in. Dir in Windows, not ls-la, as we wouldn't get bash, but a dir will show me the files that are in here. I can then run that Python script with the Python command, python space analyze _ logs.py. And now if I do dir, notice the directories that are there currently. There's one directory called data, and then also a checkpoints directory that's created by Anaconda or Jupyter itself. But if I do a dir again, we're going to see a directory called outputs. Notice that that outputs directory is now there. I can also navigate to that on the left-hand side and go to log analysis and then outputs. And now I see those 4 files. We talked about those being generated. Let's take a look at one of those files. Let's just look at summary. So we have the total failed logins, top failed usernames, total top attacker IPs, and the things we found in the web access log. Here are the user agents observed and the IPs observed, etc. We can open up SSH failures. Again, this is the CSV, and notice the icon is slightly different for the 2 CSV files. We have IP and count there. Web suspicious is usually a little bit bigger, and sure enough, we see what's being listed as suspicious there. But it's in CSV format now, again making an import easier if we wanted to import that elsewhere. And then we also have overlapping IPs here as well. So this video has accomplished a couple of things. One, we've downloaded a Python script and some data and talked through looking at that data, analyzing that data, and the reasons for analyzing that data. And then we also opened up Anaconda and got Jupyter Lab up and running and ran the Python script. Again, you can run Python scripts without Jupyter Lab. However, what we'll find is that using Jupyter Lab and using Anaconda is going to help us a little bit later when we want to run things that might get more complex and start working with the LLMs and training and learning and so on. So it was a good time to get started with that in a low pressure situation where we just had to work with very small files and a very small amount of data. I hope you found the video helpful. Thank you for watching.